We will hear from Lissette Saca, who is a freelance or independent contract interpreter who's worked in the Triangle area providing Spanish-English interpretation in a variety of settings using her skills in both consecutive and simultaneous interpretation. Lissette started out as a bilingual receptionist at a local school before becoming trained as a professional interpreter. And today, Lissette will talk with us about that journey.
So yeah, my name is Lissette Saca, and it's a pleasure once again being here with you today. Let me start by telling you a little bit about my life. My family and I are originally from El Salvador. I am married and we have 4 children. All of our 4 children were also born in El Salvador. When I lived in El Salvador, I used to work as a commercial director for a retail store chain in the clothing industry. It was Levi Strauss & Company. In 1999, we were forced to move from El Salvador to the United States due to a kidnap threat. You know, the political situation in El Salvador was terrible back then, and they were just kidnapping for ransom. So our children were very small. They were ages 10, 8, 3, and 1 when we moved here. They didn't know the language. You know, they only knew Spanish. They were not bilingual, but they eventually learned and are married to Americans as well. So they know how to manage both languages very well. First, when we moved, we lived in Miami for a couple of years. When I was living in Miami, I realized how hard it was to work a 9-to-5 job without any help watching over the kids. Then in 2003, we moved to North Carolina. Having 4 small children and no help to watch over them, I was forced to reconsider my career path. I wanted a job where I could be able to work, but also spend quality time with my kids. So I thought to myself, perhaps if I, look to find a job at the kids' school, that would work out great, since I would go in with them and we would all leave together, at the end of the school day. So I decided to apply for an open position, like Susan mentioned, the school receptionist. The school principal hired me and mentioned that the fact that I was bilingual and bicultural would be very beneficial to be at the front desk. That I will never forget Miss Mack's words. She said to me, "You are the face of our school. And if you can communicate with even more parents, that will make you a big asset to our school." Working at the school, I would see school district interpreters come in and help interpret at IEP meetings. These are individual education program meetings for children that have a special education plan, and also at parent-teacher conferences. I became friends with one specific interpreter, and her name is Helene. So I asked Helene if she thought that I could learn how to be a good interpreter. She explained what the job entitled and the importance of becoming a certified interpreter. That really sparked my interest, and I began to look deeper into becoming an interpreter and a translator and acquiring my certification. I received formal training from a certified interpreter translator teacher. She's an amazing teacher who has also become my friend. Something that resonated with me when I received her training was that she said, "As we all know, the fact that we have 2 hands doesn't necessarily make us a good pianist. The same applies to knowing 2 languages. That doesn't necessarily make us a good interpreter." I was taught and tested on 3 of the 4 different modes: consecutive interpretation, simultaneous interpretation, and sight interpretation. I feel like being well prepared has opened many doors for me. I have also continued to update my training both pre-pandemic as well as during that pandemic. I did a training at UNC hospitals that was very interesting called Bridging the Gap. It had a lot of information and a lot of cultural information as well. I also provided by CATI, Carolina Association of Translators and Interpreters. I did Positioning to Thrive Beyond Pandemic Times and From Trauma to Resilience During COVID-19 Pandemic, how to maintain personal and psychological health in a collective crisis. So I thought that was very useful, especially with what we all went through during these 3 years. And I feel like receiving constant training makes me feel well prepared in this changing world. That has been my journey from being a bilingual staff member to becoming a certified interpreter.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lissette. I know you've
Susan.
worked with a lot of different agencies, governments, nonprofits, education, et cetera. What tips do you have for agencies that are important for them or us to know when working with interpreters?
Okay, thank you, Susan. Yes, sure. I would say to these agencies, make sure that the interpreter has complete language knowledge of English and the target language. The interpreter must be able to speak both languages very well. The interpreter must also have the ability to interpret idioms and nuances. I would recommend doing testing, like we have heard from Jody, like we have heard from Perla. Doing testing prior to hiring. Ask for credentials and previous experience as well. Never have children or adults who are not familiar with the terminology interpret. For example, an adult receives an eviction notice and the parents ask the child to interpret the letter for him or for her. They might not understand that they're going to lose their home. Most interpreters work in a specific industry or field like education, healthcare, legal, etc. Therefore, they have the knowledge and experience with the terminology as well as with the lingo. Prior to contracting an interpreter, look to see if she or he has the accreditation of or certification from a reputable institution. Additionally, check to see if he or she is a member of a well-known interpreters association. For example, if you're looking to find an interpreter in the medical field, there is a National Board of Certification for Medical Interpreters, initials CMI. Also here in North Carolina, we have CATI, C-A-T-I, Carolina Association of Interpreters and Translators and Interpreters. I would also say, remind the person you contract to speak in plain language that is clear, simple, and direct. Choose your words. It's important to consider the audience's educational background when relaying terminology and information that is being shared. Something that is also very important is to remind the interpreter to speak slowly. And I'm sorry, not the interpreter, but the person who is speaking has to, the speaker has to speak slowly so your interpreter can keep up with you. Okay, you want them to be at the same, be interpreting at the same time. Remember that a professional interpreter knows that his or her role is to help bridge the communication gap. It's important that the interpreter builds trust and makes people feel comfortable, but at the same time, he or she should know to set boundaries and never give out personal opinions or advice. And finally, I would say remind the interpreter to always keep client information confidential. This is a very important one because sometimes you may have to interpret for the same client in a totally different setting. As a personal experience for myself, I have interpreted for a parent at the health department where private information about that patient was being relayed. And then on a different day, I interpreted for the same client, at her child's IEP meeting at school. So discretion and ethical code of conduct is definitely essential. Now, once you decide which interpreter you want to hire, provide them with the proper information in a timely manner on the topic that you will be discussing. For example, PowerPoint presentations, handouts, anything that would help your interpreter so he or she can be better prepared. The more information you provide to the interpreter ahead of time, the better prepared he or she will be. And this will translate to a better experience for your target audience. As a personal experience, I can name a time where one of my most difficult assignments that I ever had to interpret for was when I was hired by an organization to speak at a special worldwide conference for doctors. It was regarding a very unique rare disease called Taylor's disease. I had to be very well prepared ahead of time because my audience was going to be all doctors from across the globe. So I studied the terminology and I did research about the disease ahead of time to be well prepared. And that is my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Lissette. Thank you for sharing about your journey towards becoming a professional interpreter.
Thank you, Susan.